Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the Epic Narrative.
Well, it's party time at the Epic Narrative. Why? Why, you say? Because we're in a couple chapters, well, at least chapter 23. We're going to try and get through 23 and 24 today of the book of Leviticus, and it is all 23 is all about festivals, parties. I'm telling you, this is a our God loves to party. And I think that there are segments of the religious world, the evangelical community, that really miss this opportunity to party with the Lord. They do like going through these festivals and seeing all the symbolisms and the nuances, and I tell you, God bless them. I remember listening and going through all those things with them and thinking, oh my goodness, this does not sound like a party. Like it sounded like a lesson plan. And that was part of the deal as well, right? They did need to learn and be taught as a culture. They needed opportunities to do more than just listen to their father recount the teachings of Moses, or listen to their big brother recount the teachings of Moses. They needed opportunity for more fun. And I think the Lord wanted that as well. And that's why he put this in there. He wanted opportunity for them to learn and have a good time. There's wisdom in that. So many, at least here in America, right? So many people have looked at our government school system, Department of Education school, public schools. That's the word I'm looking for. And they've said, like, they're just not designed for really good learning situations. And there's many offshoots of educational systems that have started that more incorporate not necessarily parties, but learning experiences, less structure, more interaction, all that kind of stuff. And I don't need to lecture you on it. This is not all about the education system, but I do believe that was part of the heart of the Father when he put in all these festivals. He didn't have to. Remember, they didn't have these things. He's like, all right, these are the festivals I want. And let me just, you got the Sabbath festival, you got or the Sabbath day, which is a party in itself, Passover festival, unleavened bread, offerings of the first fruit, festival, the weeks festival, the trumpet festival, the Day of Atonement, the festival of tabernacles. What else is in this chapter? Next chapter, olive oil and bread that's set before the Lord, another offering. So what's the point of festivals, including the Sabbath? It was to draw you out from the mundane, the everyday routine. Now, a lot of us do that with our days off, right? We do something different. And sometimes you do things that have to be done. And we'll get into that in a minute, just down the road here. But get you away from your everyday routine, okay? The other thing was to bring everyday, like, business-oriented work to a halt. Stop it. Interrupt your ordinary activity with connection, both spiritual and relational. You were to reconnect with blessings and thankfulness. And there was some restoration of the body, so to speak, with rest. Now this is not an exhaustive list. I'm not saying that right, am I, Bob? No. He's like, well, it's an early morning recording. Well, earlier than usual, that's for sure. All right. This is not an exhaustive list. Thank you so much for taking your time and saying that correctly. Okay. It's just some concepts here that are important for us to see, more than just hey, this is how we're going to break down the scripture and the meanings of every jot and tittle of the activity of the festival. We want spiritual connection, yes. Spiritual training, absolutely. But we also want relational connection. We're developing a new culture here. We're developing a culture that takes slaves and makes them sons and daughters of God. People that are free, people that are trusted. And you do that by getting to know one another. I've had that said recently to me. You know, I know a lot of you will find this shocking. You'll find this shocking. But somebody actually didn't like working with me. They didn't know how to handle me. And you know, they chose to do that to express that lack of enjoyment of my presence with multiple other people, including my boss. But you know, that was their response. But in a dialogue after all of that, the coworker said to me, you know, this is why we probably need to do more things together so I get to know you more. And I thought, yeah, that, and maybe not share your dislike for me with everybody you happen to run into, but that's another whole relational conversation. Bottom line is, she was right. We do need more time together, and we would get to know each other better. And that's part of the goal of these festivals. Get to know one another better. Gain trust across the room. I mean, there were families, right, that had been manipulated by slavery to not trust one another. There were families that were so the opposite, right? They only trusted the people from their tent, so to speak. They didn't trust anyone else because they would be taken advantage of. They didn't trust their leadership because leaders were always, you know, under the thumb and influence of the Egyptian masters. And often the leaders reaped benefits from doing the bidding of the Egyptian masters. So there is a lot of cultural dynamics that needed to be reworked, not restored, but pulled out of the fabric of their lives, and new threads need to be woven in. Oh, that was such a dynamic conversation. And sorry for that, a little bit of pause. My dog's in here chewing on a bone, and my wife was trying to find him. Anyways, I was doing hand signals, then I realized I wasn't talking, so it didn't matter. I might as well just talk to her. Oh, you guys don't mind. All right. You were supposed to wear fine clothes. You were supposed to bring special foods. All of those are interwoven into the rules of a festival. Yeah, it was a good day. Now, a day of rest, right? The Sabbath. Let me just touch on that, because that was in the culture I grew up in, that was a huge deal. It was a day of rest. It was difficult for a hyperactive child, but we went to church most of the time. As a small child, we had a meal after church. It was basically, the concept was spend the whole day here. And we spent a lot of it there. And then we'd go home. Often there was another dinner at home for the family. It was honestly not a bad plan. It just, I would have programmed it differently, but that's just me. The concept was, you don't do anything on Sunday. You just relax. The language here is more the idea of avoiding excess labor. Things that you had to do, but they shouldn't be things that you had to do for work. They shouldn't be things that would be done for income or personal gain. But like if you wanted to rearrange or had to rearrange your furniture, then rearrange your furniture. You're allowed to get up and do that. If you had to go, walk the dog, then you go walk the dog. It was not like this religious mindset, which so many have attached to it, that you don't move. And the Pharisees were famous for this, infamous, famous, either way. In the New Testament, they had a rule like you could only walk 600 steps on the Sabbath. And if you did more than that, then you were, in violation of the day of rest. But they also had a rule that if you ate something, if you had something to eat or drink, then you were resting. Like so it kind of nullified all that you had done. So you could walk up to 600 steps so that you could eat, and those 600 steps didn't count. And so sometimes, rumor has it, Hal wasn't there, so I don't know, that they would have their interns, their servants, place bread and water or wine at intervals of about 600 steps, so that on the Sabbath they could walk as far as they wanted, wherever it was they wanted to go, and they could stop and they could have something to eat and drink, and then therefore they weren't breaking the Sabbath by doing all that they were doing because they were stopping to eat. Like, with any rules, there are ways around the rules. That's why there are. I mean, I remember working with as a youth pastor and as a camp director. You would put together this game and you'd explain the rules, and there was and I don't mean this in a negative, but there was always at least one who immediately would start to take advantage of the rules. In other words, they would say, well, you didn't say this. You didn't say we couldn't do this. You didn't say this was wrong. You didn't say this spot was out of bounds. You didn't, it's just like, oh, sweet Lord, bless their hearts. So yeah, the Sabbath was about excess labor. It was about personal gain labor. But if you had to do stuff with the family, you did stuff with the family. You wanted to go on a picnic, go on a picnic. I don't know if they picnicked in the Old Testament. That just sounds weird, but you could do that. I'm guessing they did. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with picnicking. Why would they not picnic in the Old Testament? I don't know. Now the next chapter. See, we did all those pretty quick, right? Good grief. 10 minutes in, we're already done with the chapter. And it's not, again, it's not because the nuances of every festival aren't worthy of being broken down. Oh, here's another thing, by the way, about these festivals, which is interesting. All of them involve wine. And if you come from a conservative world like me, like people are like, well, it's actually grape juice. Wine was watered down up to 8 times with water. So basically, the alcohol was used as a purification system for the water, and then they would drink that. So honestly, it's even watered down more than grape juice. So they weren't really drinking. Okay, that's maybe wine was used to purify water, but they're getting water from the Lord here. They're getting water from the rock. So, let's not read too much into that. I think that they drank wine. They drank wine. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with it. And the Lord wanted it at all of the festivals. I think if it was water, in essence, water that was purified with a little bit of alcohol, I don't think he would make it a point to say wine. He would say he wouldn't say anything because he'd assume, well, of course they're going to drink water with their meal. Like, I don't want them to dehydrate. They're living in the desert. Like, let's just the oral traditions. Nobody speaks about wine as a watered down water purification system. Like it's wine. I don't know how else to say it. So I'm not saying that you have to drink. I'm just let's just not get religious about it. And some can't. You just know. You got to know, and it's not illegal not to. But let's not turn it into a religious mindset with all the drinking that went on. The only day that they didn't drink was the Day of Atonement, and in that moment of rest, that was like fasting. You just everything was really somber until the next day when it was a huge party. So there was a day of all the festivals, there was only one that didn't involve getting together and having a party. And it was only one day, but you partied the next day. And when it gets, if you read the details of those, I mean, if you just read the chapter, right, you see some really specific dates, like when you do this for 7 days, and then 50 days from the 8th day, do this, then this party goes on. And it's, I mean, honestly, for me, it's a mathematical wizardry. I can't put it together. I would literally have to just do what I was told. And I imagine if I lived in that culture long enough, I eventually would put it all together. But someone like my wife she'd probably read the chapter and know all the dates. She's just that way. Like numbers just work for her, like breathing. And Lord have mercy, I'm glad we're married, because I'm telling you, I would be destitute and homeless. It was anyways. All right, on with the stories. But the reason for the specificity, is that a word? Did I make something up? Yeah, I know. I couldn't spell it either way. Even if I did make it up, I'd still spell it wrong. Anyways, the specific days were defined because the Lord was basically saying these are not optional. You can't just say, like he didn't say sometime in the spring have a harvest festival, have a planting festival. Sometime in the fall have a harvest festival. Sometime in the summer have a bread festival. Sometime in the winter have a Day of Atonement, and then a resurrection, or not resurrection, whatever festival afterwards. No, he's like very specific. These are not optional things. One of the things he wanted people to see when they observed the nation was that there was a nation who often got together and enjoyed each other's company. And they did so because that's the nature of the God that they worship. They didn't worship a God who was angry at them. They worshiped a God who wanted to, I guess you could say, party with them. A God who wanted them to get together and have relational connection, both with him and with the people around them. He wanted people who got to know each other, enjoyed each other's company, had a lot of laughter, and shared a lot of food. And this is a beautiful thing about the nature of God. I think it's one that some churches do really well, some don't, some get nervous about it. And these are all responses and reactions to a God who's like, let's get together and have a good time. And that should be a phrase in a song. Let's get together and feel all right. That is a song. That is a song. All right, on to chapter 24. Oh, Bob's like, please don't. Oh man, the production on this is going to be horrible. Poor Brian. All right. Olive oil and bread that's set before the Lord. The Lord commanded the Israelites to bring your clear oil pressed of olives for the light, so that the lamps will burn continuously, and outside the curtains of the shield of the ark of the covenant of the law of the tent of meeting, Aaron is to bring the lamps. So you got the lampstands, you got the bread, the table of bread. So the fire and the bread. These things were to basically represent everyday growth for the people, a daily exercise to remember a connection and relationship with God is more than offering once in a while. It's more than just the animals out front. This is about a daily interaction with him. Bring the bread, light the flames, keep it together. And he makes it clear that the oil in this lamp is supposed to be really, really pure. He didn't want, they didn't want the lamps going out. The light was not supposed to go out. Practical representation of a desire to be in relationship with God. Again, all of this system, this whole system, all these rules were pointing toward an opportunity to be in relationship with God. It was not pointing toward a forever system. And I think, I just think so much has been stolen because of that miss. A lot of people that missed it. So, now if you read this, right, verse 8, the bread is to be set out before the Lord regularly, Sabbath after Sabbath, on behalf of the Israelites as a lasting covenant. It belongs to Aaron and his sons to eat in the sanctuary area because it is a most holy part of their perpetual share of the food offerings presented to the Lord. So this is food. The bread was regularly eaten by Aaron and by whoever was basically on duty. So they got to eat meat and bread on the regular, both of which were sacrificed to the Lord. And it was to remember other things about how the Lord provides, and they are the ones that were sanctified to do this. And then you get this kind of weird, for me, kind of a weird story in the middle of it. So is this an inspired story? In other words, let me illustrate with something that could potentially happen, or is this an inerrant story? In other words, this did happen, and Moses wrote it down in a trance-like situation so that every detail is exactly as God commanded. This is where you and I may differ. Although if you're a regular listener, you probably agree with me on this. I believe this is an inspired story to illustrate something. So, especially because of the placement, like right here, right after we talk about the oil and the bread, the fire and the bread table, it's like, so this happened recently. The act, so what happened? Well, the son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father went out among the Israelites, and a fight broke out in the camp between him and an Israelite. The son of the Israelite woman blasphemed the name with a curse, so they brought him to Moses. So here we have a divided family. Again, interesting. It definitely could be true. I think that there were probably a lot of Egyptian men. The Lord already referred to that several times. We mentioned it here. We mentioned it in Exodus. A lot of Egyptians, Egyptian slaves married Hebrew slaves, Egyptian peasants, who also had Hebrew peasants around, married them. Like there was intermingling, and they had the choice. They could stay in Egypt, or they could go with the Hebrews and make a commitment to the Lord. Again, featuring the fact that God was not planning on Israel being the only people who did this, they were the only ones who had a relationship with God. He's like, you are an example for all the other nations to be just like you, to follow me. This is the heart of the Father. This is the heart of God. It's clear in Jesus what God's heart was here. So we have a mixed marriage, I guess you could say, and the act of speaking a curse, of course, opens the door to all kinds of stuff, right? It shows a failure to submit your personal ambitions or passions to God. It leads to the destruction of property. When you curse people, it leads to the destruction of relationships. It leads to injury, and ultimately it can lead to murder. That kind of like cursing one another, belittling one another, speaking death over one another, that kind of stuff makes a society really difficult to function in a place of peace and love, the way God is looking to create here. Antisocial behavior, I believe what's being illustrated in this story is antisocial behavior needs to be stopped. Not for any other reason, then that's not the culture we're trying to develop. Right? Human peace and harmony has to flow from a desire to be molded and grow into the likeness of God. You can't create peace and harmony without a focus on the Lord. Jesus said, right? What did he say? He said, love God and love people. That's the whole of the laws of God. And you can't curse one another and blaspheme God and also be in harmony. It can't happen. You have to work on this. And sometimes the first way that you work on something like this is you have a rule. You have a rule, and then, sorry, my dog's trying to get in a bag. Hey. Sorry. All right. Maybe Brian will take that out. You have a rule, and then ultimately that should lead to a heart, right? Behavior change produces a heart change. So in this story, it says that he went out. The son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father went out among the Israelites. So the word went out talks about the fact that he was out of his tent, and it was going to be witnessed by more than 10 people. When you were out and about, it meant that more than 10 people could see you. And he blasphemes. Now, oral tradition says that he basically scoffed at this whole table of showbread thing. He was, I don't know, making fun of it, that it was, that by the end of the week, it was stale and it was old and it was nasty and it wasn't even fit for men to eat, let alone God eat it. Like, how is this a good thing to do for God? And sometimes we will mock the practices of churches around us. We will mock the way that they do celebrations, or the way that they do worship, or the way that they do their offering or their baptisms or their morning service. Like, we will mock them because sometimes we do it because we think we're so passionate for the way we do it and we really believe that we're right. But in mocking them, we are tearing down and speaking death over them and what they do. And that is not a culture of peace and a culture of harmony that God wants to develop as a body of believers. And so what he was doing was attacking the symbolism, right, of blessings from God, of everyday provision. And so we already got the blasphemy was heard by others, and one of those others stepped forward, and basically it turned into a scuffle, bedlam. They started swinging, and I'm sure it was quickly surrounded by people who were cheering them on. Now, this brought shame on the tribes. So when they brought everybody, to Moses, the mother's tribal names are listed, not the father's, because he was an Egyptian. And it says that he would be take the blasphemer, verse 14, outside the camp. All those who heard him are to lay their hands on his head. Now, upon his head would mean that he needs to understand that he bears the responsibility for his own actions. Now, sometimes that can be, people play the victim card, right? I'm not responsible for what I did. They provoked me. All I was doing was being honest, right? I was just voicing my opinion. Why should I be called out? That sort of thing. And the Lord's like, no, you take, if it comes out of your mouth, that's your responsibility. You don't say things and do things and not bear responsibility for this. Now, I don't know what happened to the person that got in the fight with him. No idea. I couldn't find anything in the oral traditions as to what happened to him, but the boy was taken out, and then he was stoned to death. And this is what a lot of people are like, blasphemy equals the death penalty. Well, that starts a list of things that is death penalty worthy, according to this passage, right? Anyone who takes a human life put to death. Anyone who takes the life of an animal must make restitution for the life. Anyone who injures the neighbor is to make restitution in the same manner. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Inflicted injury must in turn suffer the same injury. Whoever kills an animal must make restitution. Whoever kills a human is to be put to death. You are to have the same law for foreigners and native-born Israelites. I am the Lord your God. And Moses spoke this to the Israelites, and they took the blasphemer outside the camp, and they stoned him. And the Israelites did as the Lord commanded. So this is where they took him outside to stone him, because they believed that was the rhythm that God was telling them to do. They believed that blaspheming the bread, and therefore God was worthy of death, and that's what they did. But in the list of things that are given there, eye for an eye is not literal. You don't actually poke the other guy's eye out. You don't actually break the other guy's arm if you broke your arm. You don't. It basically is teaching. It's all about monetary value, equalness. If a singer loses their hand, this is one of the illustrations I read in the Hebrew commentary. If a singer loses their hand, the monetary value of that is different than if a harp player loses their hand. So you have to make restitution based on the value of what happened. And if you murder someone, you need to make restitution to the value of that person. And if you murdered somebody who was providing for the family, or maybe you killed them inadvertently, the details are pretty clear I think we covered it last year in Exodus, but it's like you take care of that family. The value of what you took out of their lives, you have to make good on. So you are now the responsible one for that family, because that's the person that you took out. If you took out one of their, one of the firstborn son, you were responsible to restore that line of heritage. If they only had one son, you had to provide a son. It's an interesting, relationally based concept here that says restoration will be made. Restoration will be made. You don't just get to walk away and say, really sorry that happened. You do what is right, and you restore. United States has in essence, they call it the common law, right? To do no harm and to make restoration where harm has been done. That was kind of a phrase that a lot of people use, especially in the development of our Constitution. And the insurance industry, which is insanely out of balance, but the concept was restitution could be made, but the idea was people couldn't afford to have enough money in the bank to make restitution if they, if your house was damaged, or if the car was damaged, if an act of God came by, like who's responsible for that? So insurance was put into place, but now it's out of control. And again, I don't want to get into that, but the concept of common law was everybody had enough put away that if they smashed into someone's car, you bought them a new car, or you repaired the car if it wasn't that bad. If you caused personal injury, you paid for the hospital bills, and you restored things to their rightful manner. That was what this law and what would be known as the common law was designed to do back in the day. All right. I think we're going to end there. Well, we're actually kind of done with the chapter. So, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Epic Narrative. I know it's a different kind of world we're in on season 4, but I'm enjoying it. I hope you are too. We look forward to seeing you next week, right here, same time, same place.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
Hey, welcome back to Bob Thoughts. I just want to say a shout out to my beautiful daughter Anna, who she just records effortlessly, and every week when I hear her voice, I think, oh, she's the best, even though she did it months ago. Anyways, have you ever listened to something and it just like perfectly lines up with your life? So obviously today's episode was all about celebrations and good times and family and just how much experience brings us and teaches us so much better than just rote learning and following through with ritual. But anyways, so I am currently at the time of this recording, I am at a wedding. I get to, I know it sounds weird. I get to do a wedding, facilitate the ceremony, however you want to word it. I love doing weddings. I know I've done at least 100 of them. I've done them all sorts, big, small, long ones. The longest one I think I did was like an hour and 45 minutes. That was long. That was long. And the shortest one was another relative of mine, and one of my aunts or aunts, depending on where you're from. They just, we all went to a restaurant, and in between the main course and desserts, they stood up and I did the ceremony. It was crazy. It was probably 3 minutes long. It was a ton of fun. I love weddings. I just do it. I get to do one this weekend. Really fun little story. This couple, they dated in high school at a church where I was the youth pastor, and they dated off and on, and he was going through a lot, and they, whatever. He went on his own little journey. Bottom line is, he came back into the area. They started dating again. They got engaged about 1.5 years ago, and they reached out to me, and they were like, would you like asking, like, and just the way they were asking, I was just like, oh, they're going to ask me to do the wedding. Like, I can tell. I was so excited. And then they did, and I got all excited because I love doing weddings. So, yeah, if you're out there and you need a wedding guy, and feel free to call me. Now, they were also very kind. They flew me up here. I am not in the Keys at the time of this recording. I am in a much colder region of the United States, New England, but it is an opportunity to celebrate. And I also get to hang out with one faithful, long-term, hasn't missed a season or an episode listener, always been a voice of encouragement when it comes to what we do on the Epic Narrative, continuously exposing the goodness of God, helping people, in essence, take an opportunity for people to change their theology, to change what they believe about God. And he's just always been faithful to listen, to encourage, to remind me of what we do, because sometimes I need it, and he's done that for me. So, anyways, we were friends before. We had been friends for years, so it's just really cool to be hanging out with him this weekend. Again, just celebration after celebration, and I hope you guys get a chance to celebrate this week, irregardless. And I know that's not a word. I know it's not a word. It's just fun to say. It doesn't. Bob's like, it doesn't mean anything. I know, but you can't misspell it because it's not a word. And so I like words I can't misspell. Oh, what did I misspell the other day? Oh, I forget. It was in a response on Facebook. It doesn't matter. On with the show, so to speak. Yeah, I hope you guys get a chance to celebrate. And after listening to this episode, if your celebrations, are ritualistic, kind of low key, jack them up a little bit. Have some fun. This is a life worth celebrating here in the goodness and love of the Father, and He is with us always. So we bring the kingdom when we celebrate. We bring the kingdom when we laugh and get loud and just be together. It's a good thing. So have a good time this week, everyone, and I'll see you next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.